Okay, so welcome to part two of Siman Samech Vav. In part one, we just basically did the first Sif and a Gemara background. Now we're going to try to do everything else, but not background, just the tour. So let's start with the tour from section Bet. Here's Sarah. Maybe you want to read. In section Bet.
Section Bet?
Well, you know, these letters that are added in.
Where it starts Vimihu.
Yeah.
Am I in the right place?
Wait a second. I'm in the right place.
You're talking about Bet after Hay, right?
Yeah.
No, I take it back.
Oh.
Let's start with Gimel. Start with Gimel.
Gimel that has no Bet. Okay.
Gimel,
sorry.
I meant Gimel.
Gimel.
Ve'im katav la ktuba.
Yeah.
Okay. Ve'im katav la ktuba. V'na'avda. O shamachla lo alea. Shekatva lo. התבלתי כתובתי, צריך לכתוב אחרת, בעיקר הכתובה שאסור לאדם לשעות עם אשתו שעה אחת ולא כתובה. So if he writes a ketubah and then somehow it gets lost or something happens to it, then
Or machalalo. What is machalalo?
Like she regrets having done it.
No, she forgives him the amount.
Oh, she forgives him the debt. She's like, I don't need it.
She says, I'm Michael on your hitchayvuyot. You no longer have to pay me if we ever get divorced.
Right. I don't need this. Then he still has to write her another one.
It's immediately right. So she Michaeled it. It's gone. Now she's ready to write another one.
Yeah.
Kind of funny.
This seems like it could, there's a sort of like in the Davar quality that could, like a sort of like slapstick thing that could.
The point is he has to have it. He's supposed to be in a circumstance where it will cost him money to get divorced. So if she forgives it, then he's not in that circumstance anymore. He needs to rebind himself into that requirement.
Because there's a general isur on like spending any time married without a ketubah.
Exactly. Right. We saw that last time. We talked about whether there's an isur of yichud or bia. There was a machloket about that, and the Ramban holds that. Sorry, the Ramban, the Ran, I think, actually holds that it's only there's no isur of yichud, just bia. But either way, you have to have a ketubah. Okay. So now what it says, be'ikar haktuba. What does that mean?
Then not the Tosefet.
Exactly. In other words, the only thing that's required from the Torah is the ikar, which is for a betula meyaz cooking, right? Okay, we go on.
Okay, v'na'avda. כתב בעל האיתור, איכא מאן דאמר שקצוב לו זמן, שכותב לזמן של עכשיו, ואיכא מאן דאמר כיוון דאיכא סהדי דאיתתי הוות וידי, לסהדי זימנה כמה, כתבי מהי zimna. Okay, so if suppose we're talking about the case where they've lost it, the Baal Yitur says, well, there are sort of two opinions. One opinion is you write the new date based on like the time it is now. And then the other opinion is to say, well, there were witnesses at the time who saw the thing. And so you can basically rely on their testimony in order to say that like there were witnesses who saw this thing happen at this time, instead of saying like the normal version.
Well, how do you read that? Do you read that? The way I wanted to read that is that only if there are still in existence those witnesses who were there at the time, or is he saying since there were witnesses at one time and even though they're dead now, we can still write?
No, I think it's that like these, like you can talk to like Shimon, like Shimon was there, so Shimon
was there, and we can go and ask him
and we can
what the amounts were, and we're just reconstituting that lost check.
Right, Yeah. Well, are we asking him what the amounts were? Or we're just asking him based on his testimony, we're now saying, instead of saying like we're rewriting the ketubah with the old date based on Shimon's
Well, that's
testimony.
interesting. You're right.
Is it Shimon's testimony that this Tosefet was X and Y and like these were the terms?
You're right.
Or is it just that this happened on this day?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. Technically, since all you really have to write is the Iker, and the Iker is the same for everybody, so he doesn't really have to know the amount. Maybe that's interesting. That's an interesting point. Now, only if you would want to reconstitute the original ketubah as it was, then you would need to know what the amounts were.
Right, and it's just like when we said right, right. So if they know what the original, right, like Shimon remembers what day the wedding was, then that's what you write.
Mhm.
But if they don't know, then you cut it, then you do it like from this
date. You're right. You're essentially saying we're writing a new ketubah from today, and so we can put today's date on it. We don't have to reinstitute the old one. Okay. Go on.
But if we're talking about a case where she was like, I forgive you your debts or whatever, or your potential debts, then you only write the current date.
Mm-hmm.
It's just fascinating to me that like it actually works for her to be like the future debt.
Well, that is a big question. That is a big question.
And like, how does that actually? Anyway, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to talk about that on a broader scale, but like, and how that
we may talk about that. Yeah, it's a good question how she can be mochel, because why would she not be able to be mochel?
Well, it seems. I mean, one reason would be he doesn't owe her the stuff now, and he may never owe her it.
Oh,
that's one reason. Another reason is if there's like a Torah law that says he has to owe her this, then who says she gets to be mochel it?
In other words, you can't be mochel something that's a Torah requirement, right? In other words, the Torah is obligating you, and you have no ability to remove that. It's like an invalid kind of mechila. But what was your first point? What was your first point?
My first point is if maybe it's different if she's like mochel the tosefet, but just like for the ikar itself, that's a debt. That's a like debt that he only owes her in a particular circumstance, which is not yet currently the case. So why can she be mochel this like future thing that may never happen? That seems strange.
Yeah, I don't think you see the problem there. I mean, even more so, it may not even ever happen. She can mochel it. She can sell it. We saw. I don't know if we saw, or we're going to see. She can sell it to another person. It's what it really is. It's a futures contract, which they nowadays have. Nowadays for the past 100 some odd years, they have in stock markets and in the grain markets in Chicago. Futures, and a futures contract is only valid in certain circumstance. In other words, if the price is below, in other words, most futures contracts are never actually executed. So it's just a potential. And that's what this is. But you could be mochel a contract. You could rip up a contract. I don't think that's the problem. The interesting question is, so maybe he's holding that it's rabbinic. If it's rabbinic, then she could be mochel it, right? Only if you say it's deraita is it a problem to be mochel it. Let's go on.
It looks like Rav Landis and Joel both have something they really want to say.
All right. I didn't notice. I'm focusing on you. It's a private class.
Okay, just quickly, ketubah is a protective document, and therefore leads to all sorts of other forms of protection, as if, that the ketubah was never written, there is a ketubah. There's a logic of protection that goes on. I'm not saying there's other logics that aren't there, but given the fact that it's a star, you can start, fantasizing that it's a futures contract, etc. But the essential nature of the ketubah is that it's protective. How do you know she's mochel? So we don't have to go into that. Don't have to worry about that by saying he's got to write another one anyway. So it's that's part of the formation of what's happening. And therefore, that also leads to the question, is, do you want a society in which there isn't a protection? Or do you want a society in which we do protect, but nonetheless, the logic of ketubah is protection?
Right. I think in a certain way, what was underneath my question of saying like it's bizarre to have her be mochel something that's only going to happen in a particular circumstance in the future is that she doesn't actually.
I don't know, I've been a rabbi.
That like she doesn't really know how bad it's going to be down the road.
That's
And
right.
like
That's right.
I'm not sure I
That's
trust.
what I meant by. That's what I meant by saying that she really mochel.
Right. And like how can
Really
I mean I
mochel.
don't know. Like there's lots of to like put on my moral philosopher hat for 2 seconds. Like there's
We're
a lot
actually
of
going to
debate
see.
about
Yeah.
whether this kind of alienating your rights is in a case where the rights are designed to protect you against some social economic harm, is like whether that's even possible because your consent is very hard to suss out.
It's true. No, we're definitely we're going to see, I believe, one of the sources that I picked for Shir today, a discussion of that, whether she's just joking, whether she has to write it down. Maybe she has to be written down if she's Moshe. Okay. Anyway, continue reading in the tour.
I think Joel may have had something to say, but
Joel.
I was going to point to the Bach, and so you might want to bring that up later. So I'm gonna leave it for the moment. But
no, tell us what you want to say.
So the Bach, the language of the tour is like, I think meduyak, right? It's not that she's machla lo aleh shekadva lo hikabalti ketubati. She says, I already got the money, right? As opposed to like, it's not just, he says, it's not just mechila be'alma. She just can't say like, I'm mochel the ketubah. She actually has to like make an official claim or official, contract of saying, you paid me already. I don't need the money anymore. And even then we still force him to rewrite it. So.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this isn't really even like her being mochelet on the ketubah. It's more like he says, all right, you know what? You got to do it one day. Here's the money. And I think the halacha is still telling us, yeah, but we still need to make it hard for him to divorce her. And there still needs to be protection.
In other words, you're right. There's a diuk in the tour that it says shekatva lo hitkabalti ketubati. Now she defines what is mochel. Mechila must be a written mechila to make it more serious, but that's not universally agreed upon. But
the tour thinks that though. So.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue though. Where were we? If she did mechila, then you just write, and you have to do a new one. So now you have to do the time of today because there's no reconstituting that previous ketubah. It's gone. There was a mechila. You have to now create a whole new one from today's moment. So that makes sense. Okay, go to Hay.
וכן, אם מכרה כתובתה לבעלה, צריך לכתוב לה כתובה אחרת. אבל אם מכרה לאחר בטובת הנאה, אין צריך לכתוב לה כתובה אחרת, שמפני זה לא תהיה קלה בעיניו להוציאה. שאם יוצאנה צריך לפרוע הכתובה ללוקח כמו שהיה נותן לה. Okay, so now if she sells her ketubah
to a third party.
Now
the husband is still going to have to pay that third party.
Then the husband basically, right. So if she, right. Well, I was just going to say the first part, right, which is like if she sells it to her husband, then he needs to write another one.
Yeah, if she sells it to the husband, then the husband, that's the same thing as mochel.
That's basically mochel. That's the same thing.
That's basically mochel. Then there's what we're worried about, on the one hand, we're worried about protecting the woman, but really we're worried about, even more so, fulfilling this gezerah that it should be difficult for him to divorce her, which is in itself a protection of her, because presumably if she's divorced, she's going to have a difficult financial situation. So at least it was for thousands of years the case like that. So we want him to be in a circumstance where it's going to be difficult for him to divorce her. It's going to cost him money. So therefore, if he sells to a third party, it's still going to cost him money. It's going to cost him money to a third party. What's the difference? Doesn't matter that she doesn't get it. It matters that he'll have to pay something.
Right, but it does matter that she got something out of the sale.
No, it doesn't. She could sell it for, she could give it as a matana to somebody
אם
else.
מכרה לאחר בטובת הנאה.
Yeah, whatever. But tovat hana'ah, that she got something from it.
She has to
But-
get something out of it, right? It has to be like
Yeah, that you smiled to me. I mean, it could be
good
anything.
for her.
Yeah. Okay, but that's not the emphasis. Tovat hana'ah, I think the emphasis is that maybe money, maybe there's some problem with her getting money. Maybe it would be his money, you know.
Right.
not
then
sure.
it becomes
I'm not sure
Right,
exactly.
well-
I'm not exactly. I was bothered by why it says Tovat Hana'ah. I thought it had something to do with money, maybe somehow going to him or something.
but then
But I'm not sure.
right, the idea being like all of her
It-
her financial
it
gains
shouldn't-
are his anyway.
Yeah,
so then-
but it shouldn't be that way because this is her property. This ketubah is her property. It should really continue to be hers.
right.
Anyway, it's not.
Well,
I'm
that's
not
why I
sure.
was reading it as like it has to be financially beneficial to her in some way. In other words, she has to get something out of the deal.
Fine. Okay. I mean,
You can't
I don't
sell it
think
for.
that's. I don't think that's a crucial point here. The main point
Well-
is that he is being it is still there is still a difficulty for him to divorce her because he'll have to pay
Right.
this other part.
I guess I do think that the if it really does matter, like if you think that the only purpose of the ketubah is for it to be difficult for there to be like basically a knas on him divorcing her, if there to be some fine that will stop him from doing it, then it doesn't matter what she sells the ketubah for. But if you think that like actually one of the things is she has to get something out of having this, she has to get something financially if she's going to give up her right to the money, then
Yeah, I
actually
understand what you're saying.
it's protective both in
Well, let's put it in a
preventing
halachic
her from
framework.
being
In
divorced
halachic-
and
you're-
from
You're asking essentially a halachic question. If she gives it as a matana to somebody, is it the same din? And you're proposing that it's not the same din.
yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. I don't know. It's a good question. I would my instincts tell me it would be the same din, but you might.
It would be yeah.
All right, but anyway, go on. So again, the Keni machra betovat hana'ah leba'ala tzarich litov לכתובה אחרת, אבל אם מכרה לאחר בתובת הנאה,
Yeah.
אין צריך לכתוב לה כתובה אחרת, שמפני זה לא תהיה קלה בעיניו להוציאה. Because that's what we're worried about, that she shouldn't be easy to divorce. שאם יוציאנה, צריך לפרוע כתובה ללקוח, to the one who purchased the get, כמו שהיה נותן לה. Just the same amount that he would have given her.
Right. So he
So
still
he's
has
still-
to pay.
his
He's supposed to pay the
circum-
same amount. There's the same deterrent.
Yes. Now go on, bet.
ומיהו אם אינו יכול לכתוב לה כתובה, כגון בשבת, או ששכח לכתובה, יכול לייחד לה מטלטלין בשבילה, כדי שיבעול ויכתוב לה מיד אחר כך. So we saw some of this before, right?
Yeah.
If for some reason he can't write it, like it's Shabbos, or he forgets, then he can put aside some metaltalin of value as a sort of stand-in until such time, so that they can go on and have yichud and sex, and then he can write her a ketubah at the first opportunity later.
Right. So in other words, he can put put aside this money, and that can act temporarily instead of the tuba that doesn't exist for whatever reason. All right, go on. This is talking, by the way, not about a case where he never gave her a ketubah initially, right? This is talking about, which is what the Gemara was talking about, but this is talking about a case where it's got lost, and he doesn't have time, and it's almost Shabbat, and he doesn't have time to write a new one, so he can put aside metaltalin. It's kind of but it's not necessarily the same din as if there had never been a ketubah in the first
One in
place.
the first place, right? Which is like
Okay.
you're just not really supposed to do.
Because remember here, no, what the difference is going to be that if there never was one in the first place, then you needed to have adim. It's not enough to just yached metaltalin. You have to have adim. And here you don't necessarily have to, because you already have the adim. there already were Adim and they're still around, or you have it's a known thing. All right, but go on. Aleph now.
It looks like Joel, were you raising your hand?
Oh,
again?
Joel wants to.
I wanted to clarify, Rav Nachum, because I think you're claiming, I actually really like the claim, but maybe I'm misunderstanding it. Is it the way the Tur has organized this material as opposed to the way it is in the Gemara and the way the Shulchan Aruch will organize it, where this is bet, right? Where in those cases, it sounds like this is about the Resha. You can't, have either yichud or sex or whatever it is with a husband and wife, unless it's a ketubah, no matter what. And the Tur is saying, except you might be able to, like at Shabbos, you can set aside some, right before Shabbos, you don't have time to write it, you set aside some money. And the Torah is saying, if you lost the ketubah, then, and it's Shabbos, you can, before Shabbos, but right before Shabbos, you set aside the metaltalin, and then Sunday or Motzei Shabbos, you write it. And that's a different deen almost in that sense.
Yeah. That's the way I'm reading it at the moment.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it could be. You're right. Maybe the Shulchan Aruch is a little bit different. But we'll get there in a minute. We'll get there soon. I want to get there. So you're right. It's an interesting point you're making. We'll get there. So go on. Go to Aleph in Ketav Rambam.
וכתב הרמב"ם, וכן אם העידו עליו עדים וקנו ממנו שהוא חייב ל200 או 100 זהובים, הרי זה מותר עד שיהיה לו פנאי לכתוב לה. Right, so the
Well,
Rambam
now
says,
he's quoting, this is kind of the other din that Joel was just sort of mentioning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he doesn't say V'ken Katav HaRambam. He just says, he's just bringing in a new din now. The Katav HaRambam, that's the way I'm understanding it. He's just bringing in another din, which is if in general, if you don't have not where it was lost, but in a lahatchila circumstance, but you don't have the time to write your ketubah, but you're now getting married. V'ken katav, sorry, v'katav harambam v'ken im he'id alav edim v'kanu mimenu shehu chayav la, and they made a new kinyan on let's say matayim zuz, or mei zehubin, or 100 gold coins. Harei zeh mutar ad sheyeh lo panai liktov la. Then he's also mutar until he has time. It's so the way the Torah is bringing it, it sounds like an alternative. Instead of miyached metaltalin, you can also have Eidim come and just you make an oral obligation to her, and those Eidim are valid in court. So you have an obligation now. What you don't need to miyached any money. I want to go now to the Beit Yosef. And Beit Yosef is going to bring us the whole Rambam and a very interesting diuk that Beit Yosef makes, which is going to bring about a special din of this. So here, maybe who wants to read? Somebody wants to volunteer, or if not, I'll pick Raphael.
So just a second, I'm opening it. The Beit Yosef. What's it? Siman the Beit Yosef?
Ketav HaRambam. Heidu elav.
Just a second. I can't find it. What's the letter?
By me, it's Aleph with a little gimel, but it's also you can just search for the Ketav HaRambam.
V'im katav k'tuba.
Or you could do. You could look for Tzarich Liktov K'tuba.
Just a second. Yeah. וצריך לכתוב כתובה קודם מחופה, ואחר כך... וכתב הרמב"ם.
So this is the Rambam. Yeah. This is the Rambam. He's quoting from chapter 10 of Hilchos Ishus.
וכתב הרמב"ם, וכן אם העידו עליו עדים וקנו ממנו, שהוא חייב לה, וכולו, הרי זה מותר, וכולו, בפרק י' מהלכות אישות כתב, בלשון הזה, וצריך לכתוב כתובה קודם כניסה לחופה, ואחר כך יהיה מותר באשתו. וכמה הוא כותב לה וכולו. אחד הכותב כתובה. בשטר ואחד שהעידו עליו עדים וקנו מיד, או איש שהוא חייב לקוף.
This is very important. אחד הכותב את הכתובה בשטר, ואחד העידו עליו עדים. There's no difference between writing a shtar and having witnesses. וקנו מיד.
Yeah, you need Eidim and Kinyan. the Eidim,
Right.
they do.
No, the Eidim, right. The Eidim are
The
that
Kiyum.
Hikanu. The Eidim are that he right. Ve'echad ha'Eidim alav he'idu alav Eidim v'kanu miyado. In other words, and he has to actually do this kinyan in front of the Eidim. Shehu
כן,
chayav
שחייב.
la kuf o matayim harei ze muter.
כן. וכן אם נתן למטלטלין כנגד כתובתה, הרי זה מותר לבעול, עד שיהיה לו פנאי לכתוב. עד כאן לשוננו.
Exactly. So he gave 3 dinim. First he said a star, then he said Eidim, and then he said metaltalin. So now the Ketav Rav Amagi.
כל זה רב מגיד, אחד הכויסת. פשוט הוא שהקניין הרי הוא כאילו נכתב. וגם כן ידוע דסתם קניין לכתיב העומד. כן, זה... It's like we do in all chupot. We don't only write the ketubah, we do the kinyan. The kinyan, it's quite the
So what
opposite.
he means is that he means that kinyan in front of witnesses is as though it is a written contract. It's because it's meant to be written, because you don't need the chatan to agree to let the witnesses write it down. Once the witnesses have seen it and have witnessed it, it is now an official event, and they can write it down on their own. It's omed l'ktiva. It's ready to be written, and therefore it's as though it is written already. Go on. V'divrei Rambam.
ודברי הרמב"ם מבוארים, דבקנו מידו אף על פי שיש לו פנאי לכתוב, אם רצה שלא לכתוב, עכשיו אל השבי כדי למחר וליום ההכרעה, שרי. דכיוון דסתם קניין לכתיב העומד, הווה כאילו נכתב. Exactly as you said, R Nachum, he doesn't actually need to, like, the Rambam in the end does say you do need to have a written ketubah, but
It could be days later. It could be days later. You don't have to wait till you have panai. You could wait, yom, yomayim. It's not like you're in a rush.
הרי כאילו נכתב,
וזהו שכתב,
just a second, וזהו שכתב, אחד הכויסף כתובה בשטר, ואחד שהעידו עליו עדים, וכלום ידוע, הרי זה מותר, נמשמע דבהדיא דסתם קניין, אף על פי שלא נכתב, דינו שווה לכויסף ממש, ושניהם מותר לגמרי, ולא כתב עד שלא פנאי יכתוב, אלא בנתן למטלטלין,
in other words, what he's doing is like this. He's saying the last line of the Rambam, what was it going on? Was it going on the 2 last dinim or the 1 last dinim? The last line of the Rambam was, you should write it when you have panai. And he's saying that only refers to the case of you took metaltalin. But if you had witnesses, then he's not referring to, the Rambam is not meaning to include that in a case where you had witnesses, in also the din of that you have to write it soon after.
Even though he does think he does need to do it.
Well, you don't really have to at all. No, he doesn't. No, you don't really. I mean, you sort of should do it at some point. That was the Beit Yosef was saying you could write it. The Beit Yosef is sort of creating a new category, which is sort of like not indefinite. That you can't like keep it indefinitely unwritten, but also not immediately. But the strict reading of the Rambam might be even more severe, that it's indefinite. There's no time you have to write it down. Once it's been witnessed, it's as though it's shaveh b'kol davar. It's exactly like a ketubah.
Yeah, but that's his kashya, Rav Nachum, because like what he's saying basically here.
No, it's not a kashya. That's his din.
No, but like he's asking himself, wait a minute, a question. Why, if I'm right, says the Beit Yosef, does the Rambam not include the part of the kinyan inside the din of im yesh lo pnai? And he says mitama de parishit. The only reason why he doesn't need to write it as soon as possible is because it's tachlis almost as katuv. Meaning,
it's katuv. It's not really a question. I don't think it's a question. I think he's just sort of rephrasing it in slightly different words. And in these words, it has a slight different nuance, which is that you don't ever have to write it. He's sort of building up his point. He's sort of making his point stronger.
Do you think the Rambam, the Beit Yosef thinks the Rambam says we don't need to write at all?
Yes. Right? Dino shaveh lekotev mamash. The b'shnei muter legamrei. V'lo katav ad shi'eh lo panai liktov. Ella only in Benatan Lamatalin, only recurring to that case. Keneged Tupata, just when he took Metaltalin for the Ketubah. Umitime to parish, just like I explained. V'zeh shelo kinirei medivrei Rabbeinu shekatav b'shem harambam. In other words, how come the Tur didn't understand it that way? See, the Tur understands that the Rambam is saying, Farish says, the Tur, if you look up at the Tur, Ad Shelo Panai Liktov. And that was going on where he says Adim. So the Tur understands the Rambam differently. The Tur understands the Rambam as saying that the Ad Shelo Panai refers to the last two dinim of the Rambam, Metaltalin and Adim. Whereas the Beit Yosef thinks it's only referring to Adim. Only, in other words, only Metaltalin. But by Adim, you don't need to ever write it. And he says, that's what he says, Rabbeinu. When we divrei Rabbeinu, the Tur, shekatav b'shem Rambam, al ha'idu alav edim v'kanu miyado mutar ad shielo panai liktov. He says, mefarish, you need to write it. Ktovla v'lo dak. He was not correct. The Beis Yosef is saying that the Tur is incorrect in his reading of the Rambam. V'lo dak. Da'ad shielo panai liktov lo koi ela matfis metaltalin. It's only referring to metaltalin. Aval kanu miyado, but if he had witnesses that saw he made a kinyan for the money, mutter afal pishi yesh lo panai, even if he has panai. K'moshe ketavti v'devar pashutu be'enai b'diktuk havanat lashon Rambam. So he's like sure of himself that this is the right reading of the Rambam. That really, and it makes a certain logical sense once you have witnesses. You don't. Why do you have to actually need it written down? Writing down is just another way of creating a chov. Orlandis.
I'm sorry, did you see that line in the Drisha? Drisha bet, and maybe you saw it. He says he's going back and forth in the way you were saying, and then about 4 lines down in the Drisha bet, v'chein im heidu alavedim bet, hu adin shakinyan harehu akinyan harehu ki'ilu kotav shestam kinyan l'kativa omed.
Right. That's exactly what we just said.
Yeah.
In other words, it is as though it's written, because it can be written. I mean, I read in other words, one of the Mefarshim explains it like this, that you don't need the Chatan's involvement to now write the shtar. The woman could go and hire a sofer and have the 2 witnesses come, and they could write it, even if the Chatan didn't want to write it, because it's a done deal. So therefore, you don't actually need to write it. It's omed. It's ready to be written. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. You want to say something?
No, can I? Oh, sorry, Rev Lance, do you have a hand up?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
In terms of the continuation, which the biggest stuff I'm going to disagree with, but the way we do it today, it sounds like where we do both the kinyan and the signing of the ketubah, right? That if the ketubah gets lost, it's still, you don't need to write a new one. It's still valid according to this, right? Because he did a kinyan also. You've done both. You've covered both.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I never thought about that. It was so.
For
Well,
sure.
it's not a magical document to me. But on the other hand, she should keep it. You should always have it and put it in the safe place, etc.
Well, I
guess
guess
it gets lost all the time.
Because last week, or it was 2 weeks ago, Rav Nachum, you had it was a chiddush that why does the chatan do a kinyan nowadays, right? And you said because it's the shibud of gufo, right? That because it's he says even stuff that's I'm going to have in the future, and how do you do a kinyan?
I wouldn't call it a chiddush, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I don't know if you made it up or not, but it's it was told to Moshe at Sinai, and you reported it to us. That's no, but also like a second reason for it could be that just in case the ketubah gets lost, it's still, if we have a kinyan that gets done in front of Adim, it's still valid even if the ketubah gets lost. That you don't need to rewrite one. It's like covering all our bases in some ways.
Yeah, okay, true.
The only other thing I wanted to say, just not to take away from anything, is that, I mean, in practicality, yes, we write it afterwards, but we don't want those 48 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours of conjugal bliss. It's too long for conjugal bliss, but however long it is these days, conjugal bliss to in any way have a suffix about it.
Mhm. Yeah,
So that's like really important, because it's very corrosive to have a suffix about what wedding is about. It's very corrosive, and therefore, because corrosive minds can lead to mischief. Therefore, we want to say it's counts. By the way, write it up again. Or as Nachum says, by the way, he's not writing it up. The gal should get together with whatever, and she should have it written up, because
mhm.
we want people to be mischievous.
Right. We definitely want, as they say, a belt and suspenders. Okay. Raphael, why don't you keep reading? I want to read the Maharik here.
Yes, just a second. מעריק, וכן המעריק בשורש ס"ד הבין גם כן בדברי הרמב"ם, כמו שהבינו רבינו והבית יוסף כמה... I went to the Drisha, pardon.
בית יוסף,
Well,
מהריק.
to the Drisha. Just a second.
כתב בשורש ס"ד, אשר שאלת אם...
just a second, שורש ס"ד. כתב בשורש ס"ד, אשר שאלת אם אחד מקבל קניין על הכתובה, ועדיין לא חתמו העדים, האם מותר לשהות אצל אשתו או לא?
So here we have exactly this case, where, right, exactly our case, because it's, the ketubah is not valid yet, because it hasn't been signed. But he did do a kinyan in front of the witnesses. Maybe the wind blew and the ketubah disappeared. And now, or what is it? What is his case exactly? Lo chatmu ha'edim. He doesn't say why. So can he be with his wife? Allah.
נראה לי דאין להתיר אלא הדחק כגון שבת, או רוצה לקנוס אחר ששכח, אז מותר. לפי שעה, אם יכתוב לה תכף.
אז מותר לפי שעה. Then it's mutar for a short period of time. But only because of a dachak, because there's no other choice.
ויכתוב לה תכף אחר כך, אבל לסמוך לכתחילה על עדי קימין פשיטא דאין לעשות כן. אף על גב שכתב מרדכי בריש כתובות ששמח ריבה על ידי קניין, משמע כשיש פנאי, לכתוב.
Or, just like the Beis Yosef said, the Mordechai says, you could rely on Eidim lechatchila.
גם הוא כתב בשם אבי אסף, וגם הוא כתב בשם אבי אסף, והסמ"ג שאין לעשות כן על ידי הדחק, כדי פירשתי. וכן כתב הרמב"ם, וכן כתב הטור, דבתרהו, וכן ראוי לנהוג מאחר שרבינו והאחרונים הסכימו לזה עד כאן לשונו.
So all that's the Maharik. And notice who we quoted in there. Kain katav v'gam harambam. Even though the Beis Yosef says, well, what are you talking? He doesn't agree with that. So look at this Beis Yosef. I always like these Beis Yosefs where he says, Timhani.
כן, ותמהני עליו שדעת הרמב"ם היא שאין לסמוך על הקניין אלא לדעת חק, שיהיה לו פנאי לכתוב, ויכתוב הרי לשונו מוכיח בהדדה שכאן ביד דינו שווה לכויסף כתובה ממש. וכמו שהוכחתי, ואפשר שנמשך אחר דעס רבינו, כלומר הטור, בעוון דברי הרמב"ם ולא דק.
Now I want to explain. What does it mean? The efshar shenimshach achar das rabbeinu. He means maybe he was led down the garden path. In other words, maybe he got misled by the tour who also misunderstood the Rambam. In other words, when you bring like several people that are all saying the same thing, you say, oh, I got 16 opinions that are all against me. So what the Beis Yosef says, a very important point, which is all of those opinions are based on one source, on the Rambam. They're all saying it because they saw the Rambam, but they all misread the Rambam. So they're all invalid. Doesn't matter how many opinions you bring me, if they're all based on the same original source and they misinterpreted that source, then I don't care. So the Beis Yosef is throwing them all under the bus. Well, not under the bus. He's throwing them all out of the halachic discussion. He's saying, no, I know what the Rambam means. Now, to defend them, I just want to say that it's not 100% clear. I mean, the Beis Yosef is like really, how do you say, staunch in his opinion that his diuk is correct. But you could read the Rambam's words saying that Ajay Panai is going on both of those dinim. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's 100%, but the Beis Yosef says it is. So before we go any further, wait, what I want, is there a just a second. Okay, so fine. So that's the Beis Yosef
Just know, you're going to have to choose for the purpose of the share.
Oh, well, I'm just saying, Beis Yosef l'shitaso, you don't need it. So let's see that you do not need Eidim. So let's see how he paskins. So we actually have to go. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch now. Oh, you're asking me what you want? Yeah, I just think it's interesting what's going on in the Beis Yosef. My personal opinion, who's right? It does make a lot of sense, the Beis Yosef's opinion. Okay, so look at Aleph. Let's see. We read Aleph already, but I'll read it again quickly. Also the Techedim Kala Kodem Sheyichtov Laktuba V'yesh Mekelim Umatyu Teched. That's about the din of Yichud. Below Ktuba, below Ubevad Shelo Yivol. Which which is, by the way, a problem for the idea that it's that the Eidim are Omdim L'Ktiva, yeah, but who has to pay the sofer? So really, the woman shouldn't have to pay it. But anyway, Va'afilu im yirtzei liyached la'ktuba b'ma'ot. He wants to take money. O b'shar metaltalin ein shomin lo. You can't do that. El tzarish yiktov lashtar al atzmo b'demei ktuba, regarding the amount of the ktuba. V'yu kol nechasad mishuabadin la, to that ktuba. Oh, here we go. Here is the Beis Yosef paskening like himself. Oh, shiya'idu alav edim v'yiknu miyado shu chayev la mana omatayim. Notice he doesn't say, he separated very clearly metaltalin as being not allowed, and then he threw in, you write a ketubah, and then he said, and also edim. So he's clearly paskening like his own diuk that in the Rambam that lechatchila you could just use 80. Now wait a second, Haggah. So you're asking me, how do we want to paskin? So look at the Rambam. The Yeshomrim the ein lismocha edim. So now we understand these words here. He's saying, yeah, but I had the Maharik and I had all these other people that said you can't do this. So Yeshomrim she'ein lismocha edim rak b'shas adchak umiyad sheyesh lo panai liktov. Tzarich liktov. The kol shekain she'ein lismoch ken she'ein lismoch alayhu lechatchila, shouldn't do it intentionally to rely on him. V'ken roi loro, and so you should disseminate the law. In other words, it's a machlokas Ashkenazi Sfardi, machlokas Mechaber and Ramah. Be aware of this interesting machloket, that in how to read the Rambam. Just a second. Okay, so I'm not going to read the rest of Aleph because we read it already. I just wanted to show you how we pass. Let's read Bet here. Maybe Andre, you want to read Bet in the Shulchan Aruch?
Yes, just a second.
Great. So how are we leaving it? First, I shocked you and said you could have witnesses and amazing. You don't need a ketubah. and then I'm telling you, bringing you back down to earth and saying no, but the Ramah says we don't do that. But the Beis Yosef, yeah, but the Mechaber says you could.
אם אינו יכול לכתוב לה כתובה, כגון בשבת או ששכח לכתובה, יכול ליתן לה מטלטלין כנגד כתובתה, ויקבל עליו אחריות אם יאבדו או יובלו, ואז מותר לבעול עד שיהיה לו פנאי לכתוב. Okay.
So here he brings up din of metaltalin again, but he says it's but he says that it's only temporary. Well, what's the difference between bet and aleph? He also said metaltalin in aleph. So Joel, what do you say the difference is?
Oh, putting it on me is
You said it before.
No, he said metaltalin you can't do. And here he's saying you can
and
do.
here he says you can do it.
Yeah.
So
That's
what's
only
the difference?
the difference is because he doesn't have time because it's Shabbat. But in Siman, in Sif Aleph, it's like it's not Shabbat, it's Thursday, right? It's whatever, Wednesday, So
in other words, aleph is l'chatchila, and bet is b'diavad or shas adchak. That you could use metaltalin. So after he said that metaltalin is aser, he has to come and tell you, well, metaltalin could be mutter if you don't have time, but then you have to immediately write a ketubah or do edim. All right, Gimel, Andre.
Wait, can I ask a question about?
Yeah.
But I was confused by his language, liten la. My impression from the sources where this is coming from is that the action was that he was giving it he was like handing it over to someone else to hold as collateral to other people, because it was a little unclear to me with their
why shouldn't he give it to her? He could give. Why shouldn't he should give it? Essentially, it's hers. She's holding it it's like a pikadon until he actually writes the ketubah.
Right. How much control does she have over her own property once they're married is one question.
So there's two things. So you have to know that there's such a thing as nixay malug and nixay son barzel. When a woman gets married, there is nixay malug, which is owned by the woman.
Rav Nachum, when you're looking down there, we can't hear you so well.
Maybe I probably was covering the microphone with my book. Actually, now you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even if so there's nixay malug, which is owned by the woman, and the husband. But if she brings it into the marriage, the husband can derive benefit from it. But the achrayut of the object is still the woman's, because she still owns the item in a sense that if the value of it changes, she benefits or loses depending on whether it went up in value or down in value. It's still her item, but he gets the benefit of it. Like, for example, land. That could be nixay malug, where she keeps the land, but all the fruit that is grown on the land is hers. And this is not written in the ketubah. But then there is something called son barzel, which becomes owned, which is owned by the husband sort of temporarily, because it's returned to the woman at its original value. In other words, the achrayut is on him. In other words, if the land goes down in value, he has to pay her the rest. And it goes up in value, then he benefits. But in other words, actually, if it goes up in value, I'm not sure if he benefits. I don't know about that. But if it goes down in value, then she has to give her. In other words, the money is like in a safety deposit box, and she gets it back at the original value. And that's what's written in the ketubah. So if what's written in the ketubah is hers as that exact amount, then what's the difference if I give her the money now at that exact amount and she puts it in a safe deposit box? As the ketubah is the same thing as that. The ketubah is son barzel, which is what he writes here in our din. It said, the kabel alav achrayut. In other words, he has to guarantee this amount. Im ya'abed yuzlu va'az mutar livo ad sheyeh lo pnai liktov. So it's essentially its own barzel because he has taken achrayut on it. In other words, if the value goes down, he will pay her back. So the metaltalin goes to her. It's not really his. That's what I'm saying. Even though it's in her hand, even though it's his, you would say, well, everything is his. No, it's not really his. It's really hers. Because what makes something somebody's is who has the achrayut. She has he's just holding it for her.
Also, if it's Keneged Ketubah, then by definition, it's hers at this moment.
Exactly. It's
That's
hers.
the whole idea of a Ketubah.
Right. So it doesn't have to give it to a third party. Because it's hers. So she can hold it. And even if you say it's really his, but he has achrayut on it for her. So whatever, it comes out that it's her money. Sorry, it comes out that it's her money. All right, let's go on.
He
Does
can
that
just
answer your
use it
question,
whenever
Yavni?
he wants.
Wait, Yavni is not.
He can just use it whenever he wants, but okay, fine.
Well, she's holding it, so he can't really use it. But yeah, he could, if it was right in general, Nichtzon Barzel, he can use. Right, also, but it's her money. All right, let's go on. Gimel. We read Gimel? No, we read Gimel, yeah. So, Andre, read Gimel.
אם כתב לה כתובה ונאבדה, או שמחלה לו, ודווקא שכתבה לו, התקבלתי כתובתי, צריך לכתוב אחרת בעיקר הכתובה, שאסור לאדם לשעות עם אשתו שעה אחת בלי כתובה, בלא כתובה.
What does that mean?
So if the ketubah was lost, or if she relinquished her rights to the ketubah, but she said also.
He writes. Notice that the Ramah writes "Dafka shekatva lo hitkabalti." In other words, she has to write.
Only in
I
that
received
case.
it.
That she received the ketubah,
which is a little bit different from machalti, right? Kibalti is different from machalti. Because Kibalti, well, we'll see. We'll think about it. Kibalti is like, it actually, the ketubah worked. I got the money. As opposed to Machalti, where I just nullify it.
Mm-hmm. And then he has to write again another ketubah for the amount of the first ketubah because it's forbidden as a, yeah.
Wait, we'll translate the word ikar.
For the like central amount of the first ketubah. Yeah.
Right, which is the minimum.
Yeah.
In other words,
100 or 100.
If he had a tosefet and she wrote kibalti, so she kibalti, so she got it. She got the tosefet. Now he's in a situation where his wife received the money, but he has a wife without a ketubah, so he has to write her ketubah. He doesn't have to add the tosefet again. He just has to do the minimum. The only requirement now is to do the minimum ketubah if she already received her tosefet. So now let's look at the Kelkat Mecholkek Gimel. Sorry, Yud Gimel, sorry. We're just going to read the beginning of it. Here, Andre, why don't you read the first part of this?
ודווקא שכתבה לו התקבלתי. הוסיף הרב הרמה, תיפד ודווקא, דווקא.
He added that word, dafka.
Yeah, I added that word, yeah. על פי המרדכי שכתב בפירוש החובל.
פרק החובל.
בפרגע, על דאמרינן, כל לגבי בעל ודאי מחלה ודווקא על ידי שכתובה התקבלתי. אבל במחילה בעלמא לא. ומחילה כשכבר נשואה ואף על גב
אבל במחילה בעלמא לא הווה מחילה כשכבר נשואה. In other words, if she just does a mechila, it's nothing, says the Mordechai. Only if she says she wrote the words hitkabalti. But mechila as of a wife is not valid. He's going to explain why. Go ahead. V'af al gav.
ואף על גב
בשטר חוב.
אוקיי, בשטר חוב, פסק המרדכי בסנהדרין, במענה מחילה, ואפילו תפיס שטרה.
שטרה. אפילו תפס שטרה, even if he took the שטר.
הוא מביא ראייה ברורה, מהדה אמרינן, המוכר שטר חובה לחברו וחזר ומוכלו מכיל, אפשר לחלק בכתובה באישה היושבת תחת בעלה כל זמן שאינה כותבת לו התקבלתי, יכולה לומר משחקת הייתי בך, ודברי אבי, קראנו?
Havai.
אמרתי, yeah.
So what is he saying?
So he said that the problem with the mechila is that she can always, like in the case of a debt, she can always come back and say, I forgot that I said this.
Well, not I forgot. No. No, he's distinguishing it from a debt. In a debt, you can say mechila, and it's valid. If I am moichel you on a debt to me, then I moichel you. But a woman who was moichel her ketubah, she's living with her husband. There's a certain amount of pressure she's under, and she's moichel him. She could always say, "Misachek hayiti b'cha." I was kidding. She can always say, "I was kidding." V'davar havai amarti, and I was just, it was frivolous what I said. It was not significant what I said. So therefore the mechila doesn't actually work. You're saying the mechila doesn't work by a married woman, only if she writes it kabalti and writes it down. Now there's a difference between words between a husband and wife. There's lots of words between husbands and wives, and therefore you can't take everything as meant 100%. But things that are written down, in a contractual kind of ways, like she writes it kabalti and she gives them a petek, then that makes it more real. And look at the Mechelkat Mechokek Yudal.
צריך לכתוב אחרת בעיקר הכתובה, קאי על מוחלת דמה שמחלה יותר על כתובה דאורייתא. מחילתה קיימת, אבל כדי כתובה דאורייתא צריך לכתוב אחרת. אם אין מגרשה מיד, אבל בנעבדה כתובתה ודאי צריך לכתוב לה כתובה גדולה כמוקדם, ואם מגרשה צריך גם כן לשלם לה כל מה שכתב לה בתחילה. בעבדה כתובה לא נמחל בזה החוב שהיה לו עליו.
So what's he distinguishing between?
So he's distinguishing between the ikar and
Well, yeah. He's also distinguishing between two cases. The case where it's lost and the case where it's mochelet. So what's the difference?
So the mochelet, we just said that he should write her again the ketubah, but only with the ikar.
Exactly.
And whereas in the case of the lost ketubah, he has to write again with the ketubah gedola, which I mean
right.
is the tosefet, I imagine, something
exactly, like that. With the tosefet. As if it's lost, then you've got to recreate what it was. But if she's mochelet, then we take her at her word, she's really mochelet, but now he has to give her a new one. But the new one is just the minimum. That's all. It's like a new ketubah. But the nevda is like you have to reissue the lost check. So you reissue it as it was written. But in mochelet, you write her a new check. So you write the minimum. It's saying it's an important diuk. All right, let's take a break. We'll continue. Okay, so we're back, and I'm just going to read the Haggah on this Seif. He says like this. Here, so we're in this. Yeah, have the Shulchan Aruch ready, and have the base Shmuel and the Chelkat Mechokek at your hand. So we're again in Samach Vav Sif He Gimel in the Ramah. Ir Shekapshu Karkum. That means like a military band. Oh, Shgalu Min Ha'ir, or everybody was exiled. Vavdu Anashim Haktuvot Shelahen Tzrichim Lechadesh Lenashoteim Ktuvoteihem. You need to write new ones. Afalpi Sheyesh Lomar Shema Yimtzu. You might say, wait a second, maybe we'll go back to the city and we'll find our ketubas. Why should we write other ones? Shema Yimtzu Achar Kach Ktuvoteihem. Oh, Yachzeru Lehem. They'll find them or whatever. They'll get them back. Mikol makom me'achar shehaktubot behezkat avodot, because they're in the status of lost. Tzrichim ktubot acherot. You need new ones. Now look at Tet Zayin in the Chokek Machokek. He says tzrichim ktubot acherot. Klomar imu modeh kama haya sach Ketuba Rishona, Tzarich Liktov Mechadash Ketuba Acheret Kefi Sach HaRishon. If he admits and agrees to the full amount that he originally gave, then you can write it to the full amount. In other words, but if he doesn't, then you have to obviously do the minimum. But if he admits to what he gave, then you write the full amount. V'lo yochol liton. But you might say, I admit the give, but I don't want to write a second one. V'lo yochol liton Shema Timsu Ketuba Rishona v'yiyu lecha shtei ketuvot. He said, but if I write another one now, then you're going to find the other one, and you're going to say I'm chayav twice. You don't say that. Shistam matzor v'karkum hakol behezkat avud, because we consider everything lost. In other words, you cannot claim you're going to get two. But I just want to point out that you would get two, theoretically, if you wrote two, and it wasn't nebat. And in Israel, when they write a second ketubah, it's written in big letters across the top of it, otek, a copy. If you wouldn't write otek on top of it, then technically the woman could request the money twice. So they actually write otek.
Because it could be Machzir Gerushato. Could be they got divorced in the middle and they married her a second time.
Right. Well, but did he pay her in the interim?
That's what I'm saying. No, so those are the those are part of the problems. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. But so the point is we do write a second one in this case of a legion that attacks. But also in Israel they write a second one, but they write on an otek, and that's what permits it to not be a double indemnity. That's not the right word. A double that's a movie. That was a B movie. But the writing it twice is problematic theoretically. So you write otek, a copy. V'tzarich ketuba achero. Ve'im ein, I'm back to the Shulchan Aruch, or the Ramah. Ve'im eino yadua sach ketuba im yisharu tzatan. If some of the ketubas are in existence, azlinan batraihu, we go like the other ones, because there is a concept, and we saw this before in other simanim, that you give the money according to what your neighbors give. Everybody in the town should really give the same, not to embarrass people, not to brag. There's a kind of a minhag of the place. And therefore, if you find a few of the ketubas, you know what the other people are giving. We saw that earlier. We said there could be exceptional families, but in general, you go by the place. Ve'im lav danin al pi ziknei ha'ir. If you don't have any ketubas, then you ask the elders of the city, what is the standard practice in the city? V'lefi aminhag ha'ashir ulefi oshro v'ani lefi anyo. Everybody according to their level. V'kishenebda ketubah uba liktov la ketuba acheret. If he wants to write another one, sarich liktov la ketuba gedola kirishona. He needs to write her like the original one, as large as it was. Va'ayin lekamen siman kuf ayin zayin to be makom she'ein migarshin rak miratzon. What about in a place where we don't divorce except where the woman agrees? Miratzon isha. Ein tzarich liktov ketuba. This is a very interesting din here. in such a place, which is actually us, really, right? In Israel, you cannot divorce without the wife's agreement. Ein tzarich liktov ketubah, if it's lost. You don't need to write. Wait, the whole din, we just said you don't need to do it now. But hold on. Im came bisman hazeh b'medinot elu, in our countries, she'ein megarshin bal karcha, that we do not divorce this way, shel isha mishum cherem rabbeinu gershon. But wait a second, I misread that before. When it said before that b'makom she'ein megarshin, I said it as though it was talking about Rabbeinu Gershon. And then now he says Rabbeinu Gershon. So let's look and clarify what that is in Yud Aleph.
It's not really makom. It's I think it's
Exactly,
like in a
it's makom.
situation. It's where
Exactly.
where.
So that's what you're going to see in Yud Aleph in the Beit Shmuel. In the Beit Shmuel in Yud Aleph, he says Ayin. He says Sham. If you go look over there in Siman Kuf Ayin Zayin, it's talking about a person who rapes a virgin. The ketiv lo yochol l'shalcha kol yamav. You can't divorce her. Vein tzarich l'tov l'ktubah. So in such a case, you don't need to write her ketubah because anyway you can't divorce her. What's the point of writing ketubah? The whole reason of a ketubah is not to be kal be'inav l'hotziyah. But you're never going to motziyah. So what? So in that case, if you did have a ketubah and it was lost, you don't need to write another one. That's basically what he's saying. Umidameh harav, hu hadin, I think, hu hadin lefi,
Cherem Rabbeinu Gershon, isn't it?
Hu hadin, he's saying like this. The case of the rape where where the Torah prohibits you is the same. He's saying it's hu hadin lefi Cherem Rabbeinu Gershon, enu yachol legarsha bal karcha, ein tzarich litov l'ktubah. So he says nowadays you wouldn't need to write a ketubah because you can't divorce her anyway. So the Beit Shmuel's bothered by this, and he says, "V'yesh lomar iser d'oraita shani." He says, "Yeah, but that's you're comparing iser d'oraita and iser d'rabanan, right? And iser gezerah of Rabbeinu Gershon, and maybe and when it's a Torah law you don't need to write. But who says it's the same din nowadays?" So he's in Hebrew he's mistayeg. He's hesitant to adopt this opinion. But let's go back and look at the opinion. The opinion in the Ramah is Medinot elu she'ein megarshin bal karka shel isha mishum cherem rabbeinu gershon v'kemo sheyitpaer l'kama haya efshar lahakel b'ktivat haktuba aval ein minhag kain ve'ein l'shano. So he's just telling you that we're not going to actually rely on this, but it's an interesting point. It's an interesting point that because we don't really divorce without their willingness, so it's certainly not easy for him to divorce. He's not going to do it from today to the next. Therefore, the reason for a ketubah, the rabbanan, lo lahotziyah, the kalut, is less applicable today. Maybe the other reason that Sarah and Rabbi Landis were saying that it's, maybe to protect the woman so she should have food for a year. That was the original idea also. But, maybe that still stands. All right, I want to not read any more of this. I want to go to the Shulchan Aruch now before we do Vav. I'm going to skip down a little bit.
Can I ask just one question
Yes.
about this? He seems to ignore the fact that, like, the case of that he might die. Right? In other words, is it the case that the rape victim, he can't divorce her, but he could die, and then
there's still that Tnai Beidin. She still has the ketubah. It's the fact that
okay.
Excellent
It's not
answer.
written. I see.
Excellent answer, Yavni.
Good.
In other words, wait a second though. So then why do you have to write it at all? Because we're worried that she doesn't know. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. We're worried that she is not samach dat on that, and therefore the bia is biatznut, because she doesn't really think that she's got everything worked out.
So it seems like that might still apply in the case where, like, in either
no, because that's only because of
or
Garsha. Her reason for wanting it's interesting. It's an interesting point. It seems to me that the thinking going on here is that she's more worried about that what makes it a biyat znut is not that she's not concerned, is not that she doesn't get her money and that she won't be taken care of, but that she feels that she's in a circumstance of marriage that's not really marriage, that she could be at any whim could be divorced.
But she knows enough that she knows that if she's been raped, that she's not in such a circumstance. That's the
Well, that's written in the
Yeah.
Torah.
yeah.
That's
Right.
written in the
Yeah.
Torah.
I
Right.
guess that's the claim.
Anyway, yeah, but it's interesting. I'm saying, in other words, what is biyat znut in the context of marriage? It's where she's in a flimsy marriage, a marriage that's like standing on, well, here to use an ancient Sumerian mashal, standing on straw on top of water. It looks firm, but you may fall through. So let's go back to the Shulchan, to the tour.
But she's not concerned that she may fall through, like, because if he drops dead, she's gonna be starving.
That doesn't make the biyah into biyat
It's
znut.
not, that doesn't undermine the bia,
Yeah.
I guess.
That's just her worry. Every woman has that worry, but that's not
Well, not one with
that's
a
not-
written tuba,
what
because she knows she'll be provided for a year. I mean, sort
I'm
of.
saying, but that's not what causes the biyah to be a tzniut. What causes it to be a biyah tzniut is that she's kal lahotziyah, that she's a hooker, that he can just get rid of her at any whim. That's what makes it biyah tzniut. But it's not a permanent relationship. The fact that she's cared for and monetarily is a different thing. It's not about the nature of the permanence of the relationship. That's my answer. All right, let's go to Vav. Let's go back to the tour. And we'll get to this famous topic, which we touched on with the original sources for last session, which is whether ketubah is d'oraita or d'Rabbanan, and we're going to see some practical implications of this law. Second. Yeah, it's hard to find Vav because Vav is after Zion. So we're skipping Zion for the moment, and we're going to Vav in the Beit in the tour, which is Katav Rabbeinu Tam. So, Yavni, why don't you read?
כתב רבינו תם, דכתובת בתולה, that's where we are?
Yeah.
דכתובת בתולה מן התורה, ומשערין אותה בכסף צורי, והוא נון סלעים, שכל סלע ד' דינרים, ורבי מאיר וכל הגאונים כתבו שהוא דרבנן, ומשערין אותה בכסף מדינה, שהיא ו' סלעים ורבייה, וכך כתב הרמב"ם.
Wait, so I just want to explain. This is the first nafkamina. The first nafkamina, whether ketubah is d'oraita or d'Rabbanan, is that when you give the money, is the money, it's really 50, what did we say? Chamishin, what was the term? Chamishin sla'in. When you give these chamishin sla'in, are they pure silver sla'in, or are they 1/8 silver and 7/8 brass? If it's a d'oraita law, it's like kind of like, on Pesach, the first kazayit of matzah, which is d'oraita, you're supposed to have a large shear because d'oraita. But the other ones that are d'Rabbanan, you can have a smaller shear. So if the din of the money of the ketubah is d'Rabbanan, then we'll give it with this diluted currency. Because the rabbis, they didn't obligate you with too much money. We'll give the minimum. They obligate the minimum obligation, the minimal interpretation of the law when it's rabbinic. So it'll be Safek d'Rabbanan lahakya, you could almost say. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, you wouldn't say that. You would say it's Kesef Tsuri, pure. Tsuri is a city of Tsur, which was had pure silver coins. And then the other one, Rabbeinu Hananel, Rabbi Meir, וכל הגאונים כתבו שהיא מדרבנן ומשארים אותו בכסף מדינה. כסף מדינה means like the local debased currency. It means regular coins, which have brass content. And that's why it comes out, Shisha Slaim Vereva, that's exactly an eighth of 50. Is that right? I think so. Yes. So that's an eighth. V'ken Katav Rambam. Go ahead.
וכן כתב הרמב"ם, זה הרמב"ם ז"ל, שהיא כ"ח דינרי כסף ומשקל...
25.
Yeah. Oh, you have a hay, I have a chet.
It should be a hay.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
שהוא 25 דינרי כסף ומשקל כל דינר צדי ו' שיעורים, ואדוני אבי הראש ז"ל כתב, ודאי כתובה דרבנן, אלא שתקנו חכמים נון צלעים של צורי, כדי שלא תהא קלה בעיניו להוציאה, ואסמכו אקרא כמוהר הבתולות. ומשום הכי...
He lays bare the protective impulse.
Yes. In other words, the amount, we're going to give it, the amount is going to be as though it were a Torah law, even though it's the Rabbanan. So we're going to give the full 50. Says, this is the opinion of the Rosh. Go ahead.
ומשום הכי, יש מקומות שנוהגים לכתוב כסף זוזי מתן, דחזו לקי מדאורייתא. שלא יטעה אדם לומר, כיוון שהיא דרבנן, לא תגבה אלא 50 סלע דרבנן. והכותב כסף זוזי מתן, דחזו לקי, לא הפסיד. עד
So
כאן.
wait a second. So this is very important. This is a huge din in Ketubot. What he's saying is some people write the Chazi Lechi Duraita, and what they mean by that is it sounds what Chazi Lechi means, which is Mash Magia Lach Min Torah, like what is you deserve according to Torah, which sounds like it's saying that we're passing like Rabbeinu Tam, and Min Torah you are supposed to get these 50, and what the Rush is saying is no. What they really mean is Torah, you're getting a Rabbanan is money, but the amount is Torah-like money, is the original kind of money that was in the Torah, which is pure money. So that's what it means. That even though the language doesn't quite fit the Chazidachim Midoraita, that it's Magia Lach, that it's fit for you according to the Torah, really just means the money is according to the Torah. But there are other people, therefore, that don't write this in the Torah. They just write the Chazidachim. They just write it that comes to you, that should go to you. And he says that's also good. But the question is, what would they get? Would they get less or more money? Would they get the 50 or would they get the debased 50? So before we answer that, well, we'll see how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. But let's see the Beit Yosef Vav. It's very interesting Beit Yosef, this Vav here. So keep going. That's Katav Rabbeinu Tam.
Hang on, let me find it.
Wow, we're really...
כתב רבינו תם, oh wait, that's the...
wait a second.
In the Beit Yosef?
You know what? Skip from Katav. Yeah, I'm in the Beit Yosef. Skip the beginning, even though I would, just because in the interest of time, I don't think I want to read it. Just start from Havaharosh. Basically, he quotes Rabbeinu Tam, which we saw in the Gemara, which said that it is Deraita, and we paskin that it's Deraita, like Rabbi Shimon, like Rashbag, or Shimon ben Gamliel. So start from where it says V'harosh prepare a comment to Ketubot Katav.
If someone else finds it first, they can.
All right, Joel, you want to read it?
Oh, it's fine. והראש בפרק כמה כתובות כתב סברת רבינו תם ואמר כך כתב ואחר כך כתב ורבינו חננאל פירש דקיימלן כרב נחמן דאמר כתובת אישה דרבנן וכל הגאונים הסכימו דכתובת אישה דרבנן וגולבין לה נון כסף סלע מדינה
Medina, which means the lesser money.
מדינה שמינית של סלע צורי. וראיתי מפרשים דאפילו הרגילה לכתוב דחזו לקי מדאורייתא מודו דכתובת אישה דרבנן וחכמים תקנו נון כסף מדאורייתא תקנו נון כסף מדאורייתא פירוש בשקר האמור בתורה, משום שלא תהא קלה בעיניו להוציאה.
Right. In other words, in order to make it more difficult to divorce, they decided to use a larger amount, the Torah amount. Thus, yeah.
Which is odd because what the Parshanim, like Rabbeinu Hananel and the Gaonim that were quoted specifically said, at least in the way he's phrasing it. I don't know, I didn't actually look them up. But it's what he says is that they said Medina, because of Medina, right?
I don't understand.
He says, ואחר כך כתב רבנו חננאל פירש דקיימלן כרב נחמן דאמר כתובת אישה דרבנן וכל הגאונים הסכימו כתובת אישה דרבנן וגובין לה נון כסף סלע מדינה.
Right, but because we're in the middle of a conversation, he's really trying to explain what it means in a ketubah. Remember, the Rabbeinu Tam's question in the Tosfos over there was, how come we write midoraita when it's really midirabanan? And the Rabbeinu Tam answered, no, it's really doraita. And now the Rosh is quoting Mefarshim that are saying, no, when we write doraita in the ketubahs nowadays, it's what we mean is that the kesef is not like Rabbeinu Hanan, like Rabbeinu Hanan now, but the kesef is Torah type kesef, even though the halacha is it's Rabbanan. In other words, he's cutting the hair down the middle. In other words, even though, in other words, Rabbeinu Hanan was saying it's the Rabbanan, so take the lower money. And he's saying no, take the upper money, even though it's the Rabbanan.
So, but it's because Rabbeinu Hananel said it that we felt the need to say that it was the Rabbanan. Why do we need to say it's the Rabbanan?
Because that's the way the Shas appears. That's the way it seems from the Sugya. Except if you're paskin like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Anyway, so just continue on.
Okay. וסמכו הקרא דכמוהר הבתולות משום הכי נהיה למכתב דחזו לקי מדאורייתא שלא יטעה אדם לומר כיוון דמדרבנן היא לא תגבה אלא 50 סלע מדינה.
In other words, he's explaining that's why we write. Don't think that the fact that we write Duraita on our ketubas means it's Duraita, like Tosfos asked. It just means that the amount is like a Duraita amount. Okay, go on. But the Dvarim shel tam him. It makes sense what he's saying. V'akotev kesef zuzeh matan dechazu lechi lo efsid ad kan hashanah. But if you write just kesef zuzi 200, then it's also okay. So go on.
ועיין בתשובת הריב"ש, והר"ן כתב בסוף כתובות, ולעניין הלכה קיימה להם כרבנן דכתובת אישה מדבריהם. וכמו שכתב הריף בסמוך, דסוגין דחולי תלמודה, הכי דסוגין דחולי תלמודה.
All the sugyas of the Talmud seem to imply it's Rabbanan.
הילקחני דכתבי כסף זוזין מתן דחזו לקי מדאורייתא
Yeah. Ta'ut
טעות
hu.
הוא דמדאורייתא לא חזו לה.
Lo chazul amidi.
לא חזו לה מידי אלא מדרבנן. הילקח אינה גובה כלום מכוח הכתובה, אלא מתקנת חכמים גובה 200 של מדינה במקום שאין כותבים. עד כאן לשונו.
In other words,
meaning-
the Ran is saying you actually are worsening the situation by writing Saraita. The Rosh is saying it's good when you write Deraita, you're giving her more money. He's saying, no, by writing Deraita, you are saying that it's Deraita, and it's not Deraita, it's Drabanan. So your whole ketubah is pasul, and the only money you get is the minimum that the rabbis require.
Yes.
So the Ran says,
Oh,
do not,
that's the danger. I mean, that's the danger of the protective impulse. You want to protect it, you say it's your right, you kind of fudge it, you fudge it. It really means, well, but then it can make the whole thing puzzle because Be'ikar Din, it's the Rabbanim.
right?
But in other words, the perfectionist impulse of protection becomes its own, it's very hard to square the circle. Just very hard to square the circle.
So basically, we're seeing like this, that if the Rosh is saying, good, go ahead and write Deraita, but of course we all know it doesn't mean Deraita. And the Ran is saying, and it's not just the Ran, it's also the Ramban, his teacher, saying, no, you're ruining it. You're making things worse by writing Deraita. Now you puzzled the whole thing, and you will only get the money that the rabbis instituted. I'll just read a little bit more.
So what do the words at the end mean? B'makom she'en kotvin.
In other words, it's as though you didn't, like in a place where you didn't write.
So it should be kemakom she'en kotvin.
Yeah, maybe kimak. Right. Yeah, that's the way I'm reading it.
Okay.
That's the way I'm reading it. Kimak, in other words, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. That's the only way I can read it.
Yeah, should I keep going?
Yeah, well, go ahead.
ובאגד מרדכי דסוף כתובות העריך מאוד בדבר, ואלה דבין כתובת בתולה ובין כתובת אלמנה על כסף צורי.
Oh, so this is a different opinion. He's saying, he's actually saying kind of like the Rosh, because kesef tsuri means pure money. In other words, the Haggad Mordechai is saying you should give her pure money, which is the higher value. Now, I think actually, if you want to really be accurate, what you write, or not accurate, if you want to give her the larger amount, don't write Duraita, write Kesef Tsuri, like the Haggad Mordechai, or write, I think that what we write nowadays is a kukin. I think that means pure money. So that's a better language than writing. In other words, what we should write in our ketubas, really, according to what we're reading now, is Dechazi Lechi, Matayan Zuzin Matayan Zakukin. That you should get, don't write the word Duraita, because that could mislead some people, says the Ran and the Ramban. Just write, but to write the amount, the actual amount, and then specify that it's pure by writing Skukin or by writing Tsuri. Now let's look at the Darkei Moshe Yud. By me, I have a Yud Aleph star star. I don't know what you guys have, but it's the Darkei Moshe at the end of this Haggad Mordechai, and he says V'od katav mizeh perakama diktubot ayin sham ubahagaot my maniot perak Yud deishas ot vav katav the Haram. I guess who's the Haram? Rav Meir Rottenberg, or I don't know.
Yeah.
The Haram pasal ketuba shekatuv bo zuze matayin the chazilichi midrabanan. He says if you specifically write the Rabbanan now, it's also going to be puzzle. So you can't write that's Magia to you Midoraita, and you also can't write Magia Lach Midorabanan. So what do we write? I was just at an Ashkenazi wedding where they wrote the Chazi Lechi. That's Magia you. And we don't specify the right to the Rabbanan at all. I don't know. What does the Rav write? What do you write, Rav?
There's nothing more dramatic than to say Midiraisa. And that's why whoever reads it Midiraisa. So, the rabbis are making it a Midiraisa, I wouldn't say a wink and a nod. They say we're going to do this. Of course, those who are greater lamdanim understand it means it's on the quality or on the quality of money, Midiraisa. Right. But that works also because we never make one of the how can I say it? One of the breaks on the Drabanan system is that we're always mako on Drabanans. That's a break. In other words, we don't make the Drabanans as draconian, I don't know what else to say, or as fearful as we do Diorisis. But here we're making an exception. We want to protect this person. That's it. This is Midiraisa.
Right. Well, so the Nusach of Efrat is to just write the Chazi Lechi in all circumstances.
Well, they're doing it wrong.
Well, I don't know. They're following the Darkei Moshe.
Proclaimed here.
I think this is a difference between American and Israeli psak, because here, let's just finish the Darkei Moshe. The Chazali Midrabanan, the Havale Mizuyaf. It's Mizuyaf if you write Dirabanan because it's the right that says Rabbeinu Tam. V'lechen nira the tov liktov stam the Chazali, and therefore says the Ramah, says the Darkei Moshe, the Ramah Ashkenazi posik, you should write the Chazi Lechi stam, not without specifying what status it is. I think it's also a good idea because it also doesn't differentiate between betulot and not betulot, which may be socially more accepting. But whatever. That's the din of the Darkei Moshe. Don't write the Doraita, don't write the Rabbanan. Back to the Rambam. In the Beit Yosef, he goes on. Rambam ketav perik Yud me'ilchos ishus, where we left off. The bein ketubat almana bein ketubat detula eino ela mitakenat chachamim. It's just a rabbinic law for everybody. V'lo tiknu ota min hakesef hatahor ela mikesef medina. It's only and the rabbis made it specifically about lower grade money. Shehi shiva chalakim v'nechoshet. It's 7 parts brass. Ve'echad kesef v'nimsa she matayim zuz shel betula hen kafhei zuze, because an eighth of 200 is 25. Hen kafhei zuzin mikesef tahor. The kuf shel almana, and an almana who gets 100 gets yud beis v'chetzi, gets 12 and a half. We've seen this Rambam. Vazuz hu vav mein, v'mein hi mishkal yud vav soros. Nimsa azuz mishkal, and then this I don't know what this is. Mitshal shehu dram. That's a mida. That's a dram v'chetzi v'nimsa shekituva betula lamed zayin drum dross. No, drums. I don't know. V'chetzi. So it's 37 and a half drums. Kesef tahor shel almana chetzi shehu yud tet drums pachot reva. By the way, what is the amount that we give nowadays? The amount is 200 is according to what is according to the rabbinic courts in Israel is 2,784 grams. 2,784 grams. That's comes out to about $2,000. $2,000. Comes out to about $2,000. It's not very much. The Chazon Ish holds that it's 20 times that amount by his measurements, which comes out to $45,000, says the Chazon Ish, because his measurements are always bigger.
It also makes a lot. I mean, I
That's a-
guess it depends on when you're writing, but certainly for like today, that makes much more sense if the idea is this is meant to like support somebody. Like
Right.
$2,000. No, you're not like, I hope you can live off this 2,000 for the next like.
Yeah, 2,000 seems pretty chintzy. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. The Chazon Ish shir is, but that's why
But
there's a
today
Tosefet.
we have the Tosefes.
Actually, I asked the Rav who was doing this wedding last week, and he said, I said, do you add an amount? And he said, I heard that the Rabbanut requires you to add 120,000 shekels, modern shekels. And he said, yeah, it's between 80 and 150. He always adds 120, or some people 180, some people 180,000 shekels. So in other words, you add a Tosefet. According to the Rabbanut Yisrael, you're supposed to add a Tosefet of 180. I noticed on my ketubah, which was with the Rabbanut Yisrael, there is no Tosefet of 180,000 shekels.
No, they got stricter. Well, how long you been married?
Yeah, 15 and a half years.
No, they've gotten stricter in which they write it in. People used to write in Sach Mesuyim, coming to da 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 da, leading to a Sach Mesuyim.
And they don't even write the amount.
But they got rid of but they got rid of it. I'm just telling you what they did. They got rid of that. They won't allow Sach Mesuyim.
Right. So a normal wedding in Israel is supposed to have at least 120,000 shekels extra in addition to all of this. So, but anyway, that's the amount. Now let's just read on. Vahashta in the Beis Yosef. Vahashta, and now he's going to psak. Here's the psak of the Beis Yosef. Vahashta came into Arif, Vaharamam, Vaharan, Varav Meir, V'kol HaGaonim Sovrim T'Ktuva D'Rabbanan. They all hold it's rabbinic. Umishari nato b'kesef medina, and we can use the lower grade money. Lo shavkinan kol hani revuta mishum rabbeinu tam v'arosh. We don't care about all these expansions of Rabbeinu Tam and the Rosh, the Kol Shekin Hotzi Mama. And certainly, if we would actually have a din in a base din and try to reduce money, you can't take money where there's you can't take money more than what's most of the Gonim hold. Mihu. However, im katuv b'ktuba zuze matayin o meya mekesef tzaruf, if it's written in the ketubah 100 kesef tzaruf, b'havadai gove habatula 300 dram, then she certainly will get her full money if you write kesef tzaruf. Va'amana kuf nun 150 dram. You're just turning into different numbers. Akol mikesef tzaruf. So he's sort of suggesting that you write kesef tzaruf, which is what I think makes the most sense personally. Then you're very clear. You don't get into any doubts about what the amount is, and also, and also you. In other words, even a Sephardi has no problem with that. Nobody's going to have a problem with you writing that, even if you're a wedding between an Ashkenazi and a Sephardi. So, what should you write? Should you write? Because in general, Sephardim don't write to write, and Ashkenazim do. So here you have a spitaron, right? Tzaruf, and especially in light of the fact that a woman, if let's say the woman is Ashkenazi, then she's magila the full deraita amount. But he doesn't want to write on his ketubah. So you write tzaruf, and then you have your yotzei holidays. It seems to me. Umiu heiches shelo hiskir kesef tzaruf. But if you don't write kesef tzaruf, the katav zuze matayin dechazu lechi midoraita. if you just write, Chaz v'chim midoraita, Ika lishuke I magbinan la mikesef saruf, it's doubtful then whether you should take kesef saruf or not. Because maybe maybe the whole thing is puzzle, like the Ran and the Ramban say. But maybe it's like the Rosh, that you would get it. Vadat noted de lo magbiin la ela kesef medina. But my opinion or common sense says you should just take the simple money, the money of the debased money. Why? The yad bala star ala tachtona. Because the person in possession of the star, which in this case is the woman, has the least rights. You can't take money from somebody unless you have 100% proof. So, comes out according to the Mechaber and the Ramah, I believe, that you should not write Doraita, and that you should better write Saruf. I mean, I'm not paskening, I'm just learning. Interesting. Okay. We have time for one more thing, maybe. Wait, let me see. Yeah, I'll skip. There's a whole discussion in the Beis Yosef and Zion about whether you should write one total amount or whether you should separate it into the way we do, which is to say this is the Ikar and this is the Tosefet. Why do we do that separation? Interesting to know why we do that separation. We do that because if you just write, well, why do we do that separation? Say this is the Ikar and this is the Tosefet, because because if you just write one amount, you might think it means that amount. In other words, I'm not saying it clearly. If you put it this way, I'll say it the other way around. If you would just write one amount, then is that in addition to the? Oh well, forget it. I can't say it out loud without reading it. So let's go to the Shulchan Aruch. I think that was a side point. Sorry about that. Let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch and see what we can do in Vav. Let's see how he passes in Vav, which is what we just saw, Vav. So here, Josh, why don't you read Vav in the Shulchan Aruch?
Okay. I hope my internet's okay. Tell me if not.
We hear you. We hear you.
Okay. כמה שיעור הכתובה? Open question. לבתולה 200 ולאלמנה מנה. ושל זו וזו כסף מדינה. נמצא. Okay, so saying in both cases it's כסף מדינה and not. נמצא כתובות בתולה הם ל"ז דרם וחצי כסף צרוף. So it's 37.5 drams of silver. וכתובת אלמנה מחציתם שהם י"ח דרם וג' רביעים כסף צרוף.
Okay. We go on. Never mind.
עיין ביורה דעה סימן רש צדיק ד' וסימן ש"ה ערך המטבע שנקראת דרם. Because they have the conversion charts in יורה דעה. וכל זה לדעת קצת פוסקים שסביר להוג שכתובת בתולה הן אינה רק זוזי דרבנן. ש200 של בתולה עולין 6 סלעים ורביע. ויש מי שמשער כתובת בתולה י' זהובים ואלמנה 5 זהובים. There are those who
That's a larger amount, the right amount.
אבל
Go on.
לדעת יש פוסקים, 200 של בתולה ומנה של האלמנה, משערים בזוזי דאורייתא.
So there are those poskim that say that you should use the right amount.
Yeah.
V'hu
והוא
shmona pamim
8
yoter.
פעמים יותר.
Right, because remember it's one out of 7 parts to one of brass, so it'll be 8 times more.
וכתבו, לכן נהגו לכתוב בכתובה דחזי לחי מדאורייתא. The proof is that we write דחזי לחי מדאורייתא. ויש אומרים, כותבים דחזי לחי, סתמה.
I wouldn't say the proof is, you're saying it's strong. Well, according to them, we write, that's why, or fine, that's why we write to write. That's Rabbeinu Tam. Okay, go ahead. V'yesh omrim.
ויש אומרים, כותבים דחזי לחי, סתמה. הגות מימוניות. והמנהג לכתוב לבתולה דחזי לחי מדאורייתא, אבל לא לאלמנה. Okay, so the minhag is to do a bit of both. If it's a betula, you write Chazi Lechi Midoraita, and if, I guess, Almana stands for all the other categories. No, you don't write Midoraita.
Right.
because זה במקום שאין מנהג, אבל במקום שיש מנהג, מה שגובין הולכים אחר המנהג, כמו שהתבאר לכמה. So all of this, I guess from the beginning, from the Matayim Zuz enactment, all of that is a standard if you don't have a local custom, which is different to that.
Right. So actually, he is pasking you should say D'oraita. The Chazilchi D'oraita. Unless you have a minhag differently. And it's probably in 100 years in Israel, the minhag is going to be not to say D'oraita. And everybody's going to probably, well, I don't know.
Totally disagree. Totally disagree.
You don't think so? Maybe, okay, maybe I'm wrong. But here he's saying.
I didn't say you're wrong. I just think that the minhag will be there. No, this is prognostication.
Yeah, I don't know. But he's saying that the minhag is to say D'oraita, even though he said in the Beit Yosef that even though he said in the Darkei Moshe that it's problematic to write that. Now, I just want to let's close off with one more thing, which is Kaf Daled here in the Helkat Machokek. And he says like this, Misharim Bezuzei D'oraita, Dat Rabbeinu Tam, Vehu de Ketuba D'oraita. By the way, I just want to point out that the Betula is D'oraita 100 and the Almana is 50, but the 50 is because it's the Rabbanan is also debased coin, so it's an eighth of 50. So she doesn't just get half, she gets an eighth of a half. She gets a 16th of what a Betula gets. So I'm just saying because it's a double whammy. It's like also half and also it's the Rabbanan, so therefore it's a different money. Okay. Alken tzarich liten la 200 dinar kesef tzuri, which is the pure money. V'hu al derech mashal im 20 dinar shel. I'll skip this actually. V'dat harosh here. So skip to the next sentence. V'dat harosh af shekituba d'Rabbanan mekom makom tzarich liten kesef tzuri 200 dinar. V'dat haramban. Now, here is the first person to mention the Ramban. V'data Ramban, lehefech, af sheketuba d'oraita, mikol makom hasach eno d'oraita. He holds that that the din of ketuba is d'oraita, but not the amount. The amount was not determined by the Torah, but that there should be a ketuba is d'oraita. And this is borne out, by the way, if you look in the Rambam, when he talks about in Lotase Shin Hey, which is, I think, not to be with a woman unless you have a ketubah. So he sees that's a mitzvah d'oraita. And yeah, he says that a king has to have a concubine also, and that A king only a king can have a concubine. And what is a concubine? A woman that doesn't have a ketubah. So that means a non-king must have a ketubah, according to the Torah. Yet the Rambam himself says that it's the Rabbanan. So there's a steer in the Rambam. But we can explain the Rambam with this point of the Ramban, which is that the essence of the mitzvah is d'oraita, but the amount was koveya by the Rabbanan. It's kind of like the Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah, where the Rambam holds that Tefillah is a mitzvah d'oraita, and therefore women are obligated even though, because there's no time. But the actual decision to have a Shmona Esrei and to have it 3 times a day, that's the Rabbanan. But the essence of the mitzvah, without a shiur of ketubah, is d'oraita. And so says the Ramban. So he says, "V'data Ramban lahefech, af sheketubah d'oraita, mikom makom hasach eno d'oraita." The amount is not d'oraita. Rak haTorah amra yitnu la mohar v'lo natna kitzba. It just said you should give her a dowry, but didn't an amount, but didn't say but lo natna kitzba, didn't give an actual amount. Umeachar she'ein hakesef katzub b'Torah, and since the amount is not fixed in the Torah, hinehu kesef medina. That's why it's kesef medina. Dahainu 25 kafhei dinar kesef tzuri she'olim l'matayim kesef medina. That's equivalent to matayim kesef medina. Now, I actually went and read the Ramban. And he says no such thing. He doesn't actually say this. He says the Ramban actually holds it's d'Rabbanan. The Ramban holds it's d'Rabbanan. He holds it's d'Rabbanan. He doesn't wait. So then, if I look carefully, the Ramban does say. So I said he doesn't say this. He doesn't say it in his own name. He does mention it as his explanation for Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, whom he doesn't paskin. In other words, in the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds d'oraita, what he's saying is, even Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds d'oraita, he doesn't believe the amount is d'oraita. He believes that's an asmachta. And only he holds, so as Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds that the Torah is requiring a ketubah, but not by an amount. But he himself, the Ramban himself, holds that it's all the Rabbanan. So it's interesting that the Chelkat Mechokek sort of misrepresents the Ramban, but in fairness to the Chelkat Mechokek, I'll say like this, that since the Chelkat Mechokek holds like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and like Rabbi Tam, so then he's explaining, he's sort of taking the Ramban's explanation of the opinion that he paskins like. In other words, the Chelkat Mechokek paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, so I'm interested in what the Ramban has to say about Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, even though the Ramban himself doesn't paskin like that. So
this is an excellently well-made point.
Thank you.
Which, by the way, allows for medioraita. Since there's no amount.
Right.
Since there's no amount that's katsuv medioraita, all amounts become katsuv medioraita once the rabbis figured it out.
Right. Once the rabbis give the shear, then that becomes the right. That, in other words, that right in a certain sense. So that's why the amount. That's why he says it should be kesef tzuri.
Right.
But I'm also answering. It's a whole big shear I'm sort of hinting at, which is answering a few steers in the Rambam, because the Rambam says it's the Rabbanan, he says it's the Raita, and I'm answering it in this way with this opinion. But I want to say one last thing.
The Ramban doesn't hold by tefillah that it's Raita himself. I mean, it does not hold that it's
does not hold. So I just want to add one
unlike
point.
Unlike the Rambam, as you said, holds that it's Raita, except for the details.
Except for the details. So I think it fits here. I want to say that this explanation of the Ramban fits to the Rambam, actually, even though it doesn't fit to the Ramban. You should all look up this Ramban. It's in Ketubot Kuf Yud Amud Bet, I believe, 110b, I think. The Ramban on the
this is Chidushei Ramban.
Chidushei Ramban on the Talmud. Now, in all the books of Sikumim, they mention this opinion and they put in the name of the Ramban based on this Chelkat Mechokek. But if you read the Ramban, it's not really the Ramban. It's the Ramban holds the Rabbanan. So it's very interesting. to paskin.
Great.
I mean,
Great.
in other words, it's very interesting. It's sort of, you have to read the original sources if you want to know. You can't just trust the Chelkat Machokek's representation. I don't think he was misrepresenting it severely.
This is gonna be your last statement. You can't trust the Chelkat Machokek.
No, my last statement is, and I think we've been teaching this the whole year, you got to read the sources.
Yeah, okay.
You got to read the sources. You can't just rely on a smicha prep book, which tells you that there's 6 different opinions and that the Ramban holds like this. And then you go and look at the Ramban, he doesn't actually say that. So,
Could you say again where it is in the?
yeah, it's in the Chidushei Ramban Kuf Yud in Ketubot.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Kuf Yud Bet. Divra Matchil Naseh. Nasa. Nun Shin Aleph. Noseh. That's the Ramban. I can send it to you. I actually, but you'll probably find it. I copied it over. Anyway, we learned a lot of interesting sugyas, I hope, this year. If you do a wedding, consult the manual. I enjoyed learning with everybody this year. I hope you also did.
Shkoyach.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yeah.